Everybody's okay. We'll start off with the agenda. Apologies for absence. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Mark Alvin, Senior Democratic Services Officer Committees. Apologies from Councillor Mark John.
Any other apologies from anybody, please? No? Okay, thank you for that. Declarations of interest, please. Anybody got any? Richard?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest on the Pencoed application regarding the 4 houses. A number of the objectors are known to me, and it's a prejudicial interest. Okay. Thank you.
So you'll be leaving the meeting then, yes? Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else got any declarations of interest?
I've got my hand up, Mr.
Chair. Sorry, Councillor Clark. Yes, carry on.
I just wanted some perhaps legal advice. I notice on page 74, I think it is, or 76, there's changes to Planning Policy Wales, and it mentions there about second homes. I mean, if we're not going to discuss it, then obviously I don't think I need to declare an interest. But if it's going to be discussed, then I will need to. So I don't know whether to wait and see if it's been discussed and then declare, or declare now.
I'd like to speak. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clark. No, I don't think you've got to declare an interest in any event, because this item is for discussion and noting. It's not a decision to be made.
Okay, thank you.
So really, it's only information, because that's Rod will take us through it when it comes. But that is where the law is now. Is what we, it's an update.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we go on to site visits to confirm the date of Wednesday, the 22nd of March for proposed site inspections. Can somebody formally move that, please? Thank you. Number 4, there are 2 lots of minutes. The 17th of the 11th, 2022, and the 5th of the 1st, 2023. Can somebody formally move the 2 minutes, please? Thank you. All agreed? Okay, thank you for that. There are no public speakers and there's no amendment sheet. Number 7 is just for noting. Number 8, we will go on to that now. Phil, do you want to go?
Do you want to remember to leave?
Oh, could you leave, please? Thank you, Richard. Can you shut the door as well, please? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Phil Thomas, Principal Planning Officer and Case Officer for this application. Members may recall that it was presented to the Development Control Committee at the meeting held on the 6th of October 2022. Members are resolved to grant planning permission subject to the applicant entering into a Section 106 agreement to provide affordable housing, 20% of the units to be affordable or an equivalent financial contribution, and a financial contribution of £4,156 towards the provision of upgrading of children's play space and outdoor sports facilities off-site. The applicant company have, however, indicated that the requirements of the agreement would render the development unviable and seeks that the permission be issued without any Section 106 obligations, and that is the report we have before us today, members. A recommendation to approve the same scheme, but without the contributions towards affordable housing and children's play facilities. A viability appraisal has been submitted in support of the application, which is considered on page 28 to 30 of this report. So, members, it's the same scheme as you previously considered. You'll note in the report again the planning history, all references to consultee responses and representations received, and a review of the policy framework under which the application was considered previously and the same today. The main consideration for you today is the fact that the applicant is proposing now that we don't secure Section 106 obligations as part of the development. The supporting text to policy SP14 of the LDP indicates that in cases where it is claimed the development is unable to support the costs of a planning application such as this, The developer will need to demonstrate that a project is unviable by an open book approach. The applicant has submitted such an assessment, and that includes projected sales values, construction costs, finance costs, land costs, and profit margins. The main headlines from the assessment are set out in the report on page 29. In the applicant's view, as I said, the viability of the site is compromised without any contributions being made to affordable housing or off-site play facilities. The viability appraisal has been reviewed by officers in the strategic planning section, and it's considered to be a fair representation of the revenues and costs associated with the development. The conclusion that the site would be unviable with the proposed obligations is not disputed by officers. The supporting text of policy SP14 confirms that in cases where it can be demonstrated that provision of multiple obligations is unsustainable and a prioritisation is required, the Council would need to assess contributions on a case-by-case basis. Whilst the need for affordable housing across the whole of the county borough is well established and is a material planning consideration in the determination of planning applications for new housing, the evidence submitted with this application confirms that providing only one unit of affordable housing or the equivalent financial contribution would make the whole development unviable. The monies required for the upgrading of children's play space and outdoor sports facilities would be considerably less, but still undermine the viability of the proposed development. High development costs are undermining the viability of this scheme, and they are principally coming from off-site highway and drainage works. To provide surface water drainage for the site, it may be necessary to construct a new sewer at a cost of approximately £50,000. Members will recall that the application will also facilitate new pedestrianised zones on Penn Twin Road and Minford Road, which were considered critical in addressing a number of highway concerns that would also benefit existing residents as well as occupiers of the new houses. It is estimated that such works will cost £75,000. Just a note for members, we have reviewed the off-site highway works ourselves and looked at a cost just to see whether the figure quoted by the applicant is reasonable. In fact, it's possible that the actual costs will exceed £75,000. So, based on the information submitted, it is evident that this site will not be developed if the requirements to provide contributions to affordable housing and children's play facilities is not relaxed. It could reasonably be argued that the off-site highway works that are required to make the scheme acceptable in highway policy and safety terms would have greater benefits to the immediate community than the other obligations. Furthermore, a reprioritisation of the obligations in this case will allow this vacant plot of land to be brought forward for development. Our recommendation to you members is to approve the development with conditions but without the requirements of the previous Section 106 obligation. Thank you.
Can somebody formally move the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Is there any questions to the officers? No question? Oh, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a question as such. I just wanted to say that it is disappointing. I understand the viability and I understand that affordable housing would really eat into that margin. But in terms of the children's play area, I do think that we should be looking at making sure that we are providing for future generations. I understand that the costs for the groundworks, which will be necessary anyway for the residents of the new properties, regardless that it might also benefit other residents. But I do think it's very disappointing that on a profit margin of 225,000 potentially, 4,000 can't be provided towards play and sports for children in the area. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Phil, do you want to answer that question about the play area?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think it's a site, you appreciate it's a small site. At the end of the day, the threshold for affordable housing is only just reached because of the area of the site. Yes, we are looking, when we deal with any housing scheme, that it provides the appropriate level of facilities, either on-site or off-site. I think this is just such a challenging site, which is, I think, testament to the fact it's not been developed over the many years that consents have been granted. It really is challenging to deal with these costs. And we have added to those costs this time round in the new application in terms of new conditions with these off-site highway works. So I think the point's well made by the councillor, and I think when we deal with other housing sites, probably sites more generous in size, the requirements of the policies and the obligations that, and the SPG that we have for open space, we will be looking, to deliver them elsewhere. But I think the evidence before us here is that I think it's challenging to develop this site, forgetting the obligations, add those obligations in, and I think really the site will not come forward. So point noted, and for future consideration, obviously those policies will be relevant to any future applications. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's 2 points I want to make. The first one is that with construction costs increasing to the level they have recently and the likely increases in the future, this may mean that the vast majority of smaller developments like this get to a position where they are not viable, which then really blows out of the water our whole plan around providing affordable housing. And we already know that Bridgend has less affordable housing, or has put in place less affordable housing over the last 5 years than almost any other Welsh borough. And I am very concerned that when we make decisions like this, that it actually doesn't help our residents. But it does actually help the developer, because they go away with a fairly decent profit, and we get expensive houses which aren't really helping our housing situation. So I am really concerned that this is something that's going to be repeated over multiple different applications. So that's the first point. The second point that I wanted to raise is that if the developer is using their people and their investment on this site, then they're not using it on a site which may actually be better off in terms of viability and would provide affordable housing. And so I don't think it's merely about whether this particular site is viable. I think we do also need to think about the wider situation of, well, would the developer be better off focusing on a different site and using the resources elsewhere? Now, I know that's not a material consideration for this particular decision, because this is only a decision on the merits of this particular case. But I do think, as a developer control committee, we are now presented with a problem, in that if developers come up with these borderline cases continually, it may well be that all we do as an authority is okay developments which don't have affordable housing, and that is clearly not to the benefits of the broader residents across Bridgend. Now, these are more comments than questions, but I do wish to put them on record that I am very concerned that our historic record on affordable housing is poor. And as we go forward, that's only going to become more difficult for us to build affordable housing in the borough.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Jonathan's going to answer your question.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, Jonathan Parsons, Group Manager for Planning and Development Services. In response to the issues raised by Councillor Griffiths, I sort of fully take on board those concerns, and as a professional planner, I share that concern about the delivery of affordable housing. One of the key aspects of planning is to deliver affordable housing. We have policies in our development plan, and we have supplementary planning guidance that allows that to happen. So we can do it legitimately through the planning process. Unfortunately, in my sort of varied career in planning, there have been situations where it is simply not viable to provide that contribution to affordable housing. Whether we like it or not, that's the sort of current situation. Now, in planning, we can only determine applications and matters on sound land use planning grounds. There is scope within our supplementary planning guidance and within our LDB policy that where it can be demonstrated that the viability is marginal, then we can relax those standards. It's not something we take lightly, and it's not something we automatically concede to. There has to be evidence and to support that claim. And in this case, the applicant has submitted details of financial details, and the applicant has also advised he's happy for these to be shared with the planning committee. He has provided a lot of information on the costs associated with the site. And we can't argue with that evidence. Financial evidence is there. It's been checked. It's been assessed, and as an authority, we can't dispute it. It's not something that we can say no, you're wrong. If you look at the figures that have been presented, they're in the report. Then members can see that for themselves. It's not an issue we take lightly, and it's not something that we wish to support every time this comes in, but we can only make decisions on land use grounds and on the necessary evidence. Now, I'm not aware if Bridgend is delivering less affordable housing than any other authority. If you look at the LDP documents, the monitoring report from the LDP, the LDP has delivered a considerable amount. I couldn't put a figure on it at the moment, but there's a considerable amount of affordable housing through that particular plan. And the replacement plan will aim to do the same. But it's usually on these smaller sites where there are a lot of overheads that we get these issues, and we've had it in the past in some areas where the land value wasn't particularly high, and there's just no profit in the scheme to actually support that. And I think if you look at the figures in the report as well, you see that profit margin is quite low as it stands. I mean, development industry would expect at least 15% profit, but it is quite marginal. So this is where we are. The other issue, of course, is there are other demands on the development, other contributions, and the other contribution is the player. Again, unfortunate, but for the scheme that we are proposing, there wasn't an awful lot of contribution in that regard either. It's not going to create a new playground, but we would have gone to maintaining an existing play area. But the gain in this is that the scheme will come with better access, with a shared access that will allow pedestrians and cycles. So it is technically an active travel route. That won't be done through an agreement or through a contribution. That will be done as part of the development itself. So there is still a bit of planning gain there. And in this case, if you look at the report, the on-balance recommendation is that the safety of pedestrians would outweigh the loss of other contributions in this respect. So it's an unfortunate position to be in, and it's possible we may see other applications come into committee with this regard. But as I said, every decision has to be made on land use planning grounds, and everything has to be evidenced, and the evidence is there in the report. So hopefully that will explain that in a bit more detail, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, Simon, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I completely understand. If I may just ask for one clarification, you use the term relaxation of the rules at one point. Could you just clarify for me? Are we here applying the rules strictly, or are we actually actively relaxing the rules to allow the developer not to make contributions?
Yeah, there is scope within the planning guidance and the planning policies that we can relax those contributions where it can be demonstrated, where there's evidence to demonstrate that the viability is marginal. That's actually in the policy. That's in the supplementary planning guidance.
Okay, Simon.
Yeah, this is a very balanced one, as Jonathan's pointed out there. I think it's really quite difficult. I think, given the situation with affordable housing in the borough, as Councillor Bennett said, this is extremely unfortunate, and I am concerned that we are using our discretion to relax rules, and I am uncomfortable with relaxing rules, which then do lessen the amount of affordable housing that could be provided. I'm also concerned about, also as Councillor Bennett said, that the relaxation is total as far as I understand it, with no contributions to play areas, and I think small contributions to those areas would actually be beneficial to the locale, even though they're not providing new play areas. And given that this is a marginal viability, I think there should be room for at least the support for play areas, if not for affordable housing.
Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Pratt, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Jonathan's answered many of my questions in the last contribution. But I mean, yes, it is disappointing that the Section 106 money for the play area has been proposed as not going forward. But if we reject this application with the highways improvements that are in it, I would imagine that those highways improvements wouldn't go forward. So there is still a benefit here. You know, I can't imagine the finances that we're in at the moment, that we're suddenly going to throw loads of money from the highways department in improving this highway. So there's still a benefit to be gained here. We haven't got everything that we wanted, and I appreciate that, but difficult times. Private enterprise want to make profit. It's where we are. It is disappointing on the play part, but I'm happy to support this on the grounds that the highway improvements will still be there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Next one, Councillor Martin Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Bennett and I think also Councillor Griffiths that the contribution to the play park does seem modest, and given the figures discussed, I don't think it's unreasonable to include a contribution for that play park. If I seem to remember, there was a lot of discussion about that at the time it was originally approved. Speaking of which, my second point is, why wasn't this all discussed and why weren't these figures provided just a few short months ago? I don't understand why we spent all that time and energy applying these conditions, which are now being taken away because they're unviable. Surely there was discussion before they were proposed to the committee, but I'm not minded to support this without the contribution to the play park, but that's my current position.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'll get Phil to answer the one question you asked.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. The obligations, there was some brief discussion early on in the process with the planning application about obligations, but for much of the time, we were potentially looking at a refusal of planning permission on this application because of the concerns of active travel and the linkages to this particular site. And it was through the negotiation and through the developer promoting a scheme of off-site highway improvements that convinced the highway officer to change his position and support the application and then secure those works through the consent. I think the understanding that we had is that those obligations would be something that the applicant would be able to deliver. But I think what they've done, as developers will often do, is then go away and then start to cost out a scheme and think, right, okay, now let's see how this works in terms of the requirements of the conditions and the obligations, plus them doing their own site investigation work. Remember, this is an outline application, it's not a detailed submission, and they've gone away and done that work and then have suddenly realised that there are some costs within the development of this site that they possibly weren't fully aware of, or certainly weren't aware how much that was going to be, as members have said, in the current time where development costs have gone up anyway. So I think, yes, in a perfect world, we'd have all this information before we put it to members, and on occasions we will have viability appraisals submitted with applications. On this occasion, it was prompted by the fact that we said, well, if you want to present an application to us, or you want us to present an application without any obligations, you're going to have to give us the evidence to justify that. So that was done, and we've scrutinised that, and as everybody said, it is regrettable, but the evidence is what it is. So Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, if it's okay, Chair, is it was, you know, these reports are public, and the developer would have had ample opportunity to see what officers were recommending. It's just very disappointing that they've come back 3 months later, not at the time. Because would we have considered the whole thing differently had we known this at the time? So it is disappointing, and it's something I think I and maybe others need to reflect on.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Keane. Kearns. Councillor Kern.
Oh, you want to talk to me? Thank you. Yeah, I got to be honest. I've read it through, and I got a. Well, it's more of a comment. I agree with Councillor Bennett and Councillor Griffiths on the comments that they've made. It's this argument about viability, and I'm as far as I'm concerned, I would support it if they applied all those conditions and they adhered to them. But this thing about being a bit flexible and let them get away with it, I don't know. It doesn't quite sit right with me at the moment. I got to be honest. That's about it, really, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Hughes, Martin Hughes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've noted all the comments that have been made, and you know, it's been an interesting discussion about Section 106 in general. But my understanding of Section 106 that it's for affordable housing, infrastructure, playgrounds, whatever. But also, I think the concept of it is that there should be some community benefit deriving from schemes, especially small schemes. So what I would ask, Chair, if it's possible, if there can be some perhaps smaller, more moderate and proportionate contributions made, for example, to the local school or the local health clinic, which I think would be very much in the spirit of Section 106, in that there'd be a community contribution, but also, you know, at a level which is meaningful, but is also affordable to the developer. So if we could leave that one with you, Chair, to consider.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Jonathan Parsons will now answer that question for you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. It's a very good point raised. Back in the old days, yeah, we could secure contributions for other community benefits through the planning system. That changed significantly about 10, 12 years ago, and new legislation and regulations that came into effect sort of restricted what we could seek for Section 106 towards community benefits. So they have to be related to the site, they have to be related to the development, and they have to be based on sound need. So in other words, we couldn't request a contribution that is not necessary to enable the development. So things like highway improvements, things like education contributions, things like play areas, active travel, affordable housing, these are contributions that we can legitimately request for a housing development, because they will generate more kids will go to school, more people will use the facilities, etc. What we can't do, unfortunately, is ask for money to go to things like surgeries and to schools where it is not, where we can't evidence or we can't back that up. So the regulations are quite clear in that respect. It's not, unfortunately, it's not something we can change. So we would be acting outside the law to do that. In this particular case, as I mentioned previously, where we've sought contributions in a previous consent, it's the revised applications come in, which has provided the financial viability evidence that suggests that site is no longer viable. Now, under planning policy, that's not necessarily a reason to refuse. There is allowance within planning policy to accept that position. And again, I go back to to what I heard said earlier, is that what you've got in front of you, members, is an unbalanced recommendation. Yes, it's unfortunate, and it's not something that I take any sort of pleasure in doing. But this small development is not going to provide that affordable housing. The alternative is that development doesn't go ahead. It's not going to, unfortunately, make that contribution to the open space. It's not a good position to be in, but that is the situation. And the affordable housing issue is only triggered by the area of the site, and it's very, very marginally over that area of the site to actually trigger that need to make a contribution. 4 houses would normally require a contribution for affordable housing. It's only that it's slightly over that 0.15 of a hectare. It's 0.17 per hectare in the site. So if the site boundary was reduced slightly, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So that's the position. It's not ideal. It's not something that we are comfortable with doing, but there's nothing in planning policy or that would prevent us from taking this decision in line with the recommendation. But I'll leave it there then, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Are you happy with that reply, Councillor Hughes?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Simon, want to come back in?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose, please, that we amend this and so that we put the play park money back in as a requirement. For a development of this size, I don't know the overall value of the houses that are going to be built here, but for 4 houses of this size in Pencoed, it's going to be a substantial sum, and a £4,000 requirement is not going to make any difference to the developer in reality. The sort of the error bars that we have on the profitability on this are much greater than that, and there will be tiny things which will make this viable or unviable way above the 4,000 mark. So I'd like us as a committee I'd like to propose that we require the developer under the section 106, which we have recognised would be required, to put just that play park money back in, but none of the others.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Williams, Martin Williams.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Now this has been moved and seconded. I just wanted clarification on the. I have sympathy for Councillor Griffiths' point of view, and in a way I'd like to support it, but clarification on what that £4,000 would be spent on. Is it a new play park? Is it substantial improvements on an existing play park before we make those decisions? Thank you, Chair.
Phil, can you answer that, please? Councillor Pratt's question.
Specifically, there's a park to the south east of this particular site, and I think it would be a contribution to the upgrading of that facility. There aren't many parks and play facilities that I could identify that they would need that, but that's the closest to this and would be of benefit, shall we say, to the residents of this development and those in the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor David Harrison, please.
Am I working? Yes. Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Pratt has said, would this money, the £4,000, be for a new play park or the upgrade of the existing play park? I'd be quite happy to see it because it is a very small sum of money, and I don't think you would get a full play park for £4,000. But even if it was a that small sum of £4,000 to upgrade the existing park, I would be very happy to see it go into there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that question. Phil?
Councillor's correct. That sum of money would never deliver a new play park. It would probably go into the maintenance of the existing facilities there. Possibly if there's a piece of equipment that needs replacing, but not a new play park. Just maybe upgrading or maintenance. Yes, correct, yeah.
Come in any election.
I'll bring Rod in now, the legal officer.
Yes, and to identify for purposes of tape, Roderick Jones, legal advisor to the committee. So we've had the amendment moved and seconded. It should go before we have had the motion or the recommendation moved as well, Chair.
Yeah.
But the amendment should go first. I'm assuming here we're going to need a named vote.
Yeah.
On this. So I'll ask Mark, and Mike, I think, is doing the equipment, just to explain how we vote, and then I will take a tally and Mark will also take a tally. But can you come in just 1 second, Mark, please?
Yeah, it's just voting for the amendment now, for, against or abstain, and then we'll go one by one, and Mike will call the names out, and then Rod, the legal officer, will tally up. Okay, thank you.
So once Mike's gone through the process, Chair, I'll just, communicate the result to you. But just to remind members, this is for the amendment, which would be that rather than there being no Section 106 at all, which is a recommendation, that there would be a 106, but only for the play area, which...
And the highways.
Highways.
Well, the highways is in the conditions, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that doesn't go into 106 for highways, it's actually secured by condition. So this vote is only about the, do we want to have a 106 for the play area? And I must confess, I've forgotten the exact figure. Perhaps Phil can remind me, but it's 4,000?
£4,156, yeah.
There you are, Chair. So that's what the vote's about, solely that, because as Rodri's reminded me, the highways improvements are secured anyway in this recommendation. So that's in one of the conditions. So it's just about that. Okay. So when Mike's ready, Chair, unless any member's got a question.
No. Mike, can you call the names out then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chris Davis.
For the amendment.
Councillor Dave Harrison.
For.
Councillor Della Hughes.
For.
Councillor Heather Griffiths. Councillor Heather Griffiths.
Against.
You get that, Mike? Against?
Yeah, I got that, yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Heidi Bennett.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Pratt.
Against.
Councillor Martin Hughes.
For.
Councillor Martin Williams.
For.
Councillor Mike Kern.
For.
Councillor Noah Clark.
Against.
Councillor Richard Collins.
For.
Councillor Richard Granville.
Against?
Councillor Richard Williams.
He's declared an interest.
Oh, yeah, sorry,
He's
yeah.
not outside, Mike.
Councillor Simon Griffiths.
For.
Councillor Steve Easterbrook.
For.
Councillor Tony Barrow. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Against?
Against. And Councillor William Kendall.
For.
Thank you, Chair. I make that 11 for and 5 against.
Correct.
1, 2. Yeah, 11 for, Chair, and 5 against.
So that was passed, the amendment was passed.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. The amendment was passed, so the recommendation is amended to that extent that there should be a 106 just to secure the play area contribution. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Phil? Yep. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Right, number 9 on the agenda is appeals. Jonathan, do you want to go through them, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got a number of appeals submitted since the last committee. That's detailed in the report. We have had one decision I think is worth noting, and that's in connection with an extension and part conversion of a property at Longacre. That's in Court Coleman. This is a property within the countryside. And there's a little bit of a history to this particular site. And some years ago, there was a dwelling on the site, and that dwelling was partially demolished or substantially demolished, and a new dwelling was started, or work started on a replacement dwelling, and without the benefit of planning permission. And subsequent application came forward, and the authority refused the application, and this is on the basis that because the property was demolished and there was nothing left of the original building, that the use had been abandoned, so it was no longer capable of residential development because that use is no longer there. So it was tantamount to a new dwelling in the countryside, and that did not comply with our LDP policies or UDP policies at that particular time. It went to an appeal, went to a public inquiry actually, and the inspector did not agree with the council. The inspector came to the view that even though the building had gone, it was substantially gone, there was nothing existing of the former building, it still actually had a residential use. So it still actually had a residential curtilage, and the owner could, for example, put up residential curtilage and permit curtilage buildings and permitted development. So we didn't win that appeal. So the dwelling got consent, it was built, and this particular application was to make that dwelling bigger again. It's to convert outbuildings and create a link to the buildings. So it was actually increasing the mass of the building. We were concerned as a planning authority that this would be again increasing the appearance of the building, and this would be detrimental to visual amenity in the area. In this case, the inspector again did not, completely different inspector, different circumstances, but the inspector did not agree with the authority, and he basically said that as the property was not well viewed from any public area, that the impact on rural amenity would be minimum, and has allowed the appeal. So a bit of history to the site, and again it's another decision by the inspector where they did not agree with the decision of the authority in this regard. Normally with these sort of properties in the countryside, we do have a reasonable success rate with refusing them and winning on appeals. We do have policies in our supplementary planning guidance that does restrict the size that you can increase a rural property by, and we will possibly have to re-look at this policy when we bring the new SPG out later on this year in the light of this decision. But that's the decision of the inspector, and the reasoning was quite sound, and thought I'd bring that to members' attention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Has anybody got any questions on any of the appeals they'd like to ask? If not, can somebody move we note the appeals, please? Thank you. Moved and seconded. Okay. We're going to the next one then, number 10. Rodri's now going to take us to changes to the Town and Country Planning Act user classes.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Roger Davis, Development and Building Control Manager, BCPC. Just a quick report for members noting it's new legislation that came in October last year, effectively following on from a consultation to try and limit or control the the amount of second homes and holiday lets in more other parts of Wales, really. So more the sort of coastal regions who have been affected by this issue, and basically pricing out local communities from being able to afford houses in their communities. So this is affecting the planning side of things. There are other elements that Welsh Government have introduced on the fiscal side of things, so the council tax issues and stuff like that. But this is a way that Welsh Government have introduced new legislation to split the use classes order up. So a second home or a holiday let would not just be classed in the same use class as a standard dwelling. They've got their own use classes now, so C5 for second homes and C6 for holiday lets. Quite recently, relatively recently, Welsh Government added a new use class for small houses in multiple occupations, so 3 to 6 occupants. So that was C4. So now we've got C3, C4, C5, and C6. Just so on new developments, really, if you're looking to use it as a second home or a holiday let, you'd have to apply for that use class. But they are interchangeable, unfortunately, so you can move from one to the other without the need for planning permission, unless we put a restriction on at the consent stage. So unless we say you're applying for homes here, you can only use them in C3 for main residence, home only. And then obviously if the applicant wanted to do something else, they'd have to apply to relax that condition or remove it. And there's another way of introducing an Article 4 direction for a particular area to try and control this expanse of second homes or holiday lets. As I said, it probably doesn't affect us in Bridgend that much, but it's something to bear in mind, not just in the DC side of things, but also in allocating sites for housing in the future as well. We might decide to restrict the scope for second homes and short-term holiday lets in those areas as well. So as an addition to these changes, there is one on betting shops of all things. So they've removed betting shops from the A2 use class, which is for financial and professional services, and made it effectively a use that is not in any specific class. So any change to a betting shop would automatically need planning permission. It doesn't work the other way, so I think they realise that to promote retail in some of these areas, you can still change from a betting shop that's in existence now to a retail shop without the need for planning permission. But if you wanted to change something into a betting shop, you would have to have planning permission. Probably with the way betting shops are going now, there's less and less on the high street. It's probably come about 10 years too late, but at least we've got a bit more control over it now. So those are the changes. Any questions, by all means, ask. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody got any questions regarding this? For Rodri, please. Or are we all happy with the comments he's just made? Well, I can't see anybody asking any questions. Can somebody formally move? We note the recommendation. Thank you. We'll now go on to number 11, the Royal Town Planning Institute, the big conversation. Jonathan Parsons is now going to take that.
Thank you, Chair. This is again, it's a report for noting. It's not, there's no decision or recommendation. I'm quite happy to take any members' questions or queries afterwards. The purpose of this item is to inform members of committee about a recent research that's been carried out by the Royal Town Planning Institute. Now, the RTPI is the organisation that looks, the professional organisation looks after professional planners in the UK and further afield. So it carries some weight. It is a well-respected and a well-established professional organisation. The research is called the Big Conversation, and its purpose is to look at the well-being of the planning profession in Wales. Now, this was undertaken as a request of the Minister for Climate Change last year, and she did wish to understand better the well-being of planners operating under challenging circumstances. So this is focused. The survey is focused in Wales. It's the Welsh branch of the RTPI, RTPI Cymru, and they carried out this research in last year, and all members were invited to participate in that, and myself included. The research then set out to better understand the pressures being faced by planners and undertake a health check of the profession in Wales. And it's widely known that LPAs, local planning authorities in Wales, have significant reductions in budgets to support their work and reduce resources. So that's something that's not new to us. But I think this research is probably more focused on the impact that situation is actually having on the profession. As members of the Development Control Committee, you are part of the planning function in Wales. You are part of that system, and you represent, along with us officers, you represent the local planning authority element of the council. So you are in that system. So you are part of that. Planners in Wales, they're not just local authorities. There's planners in the private sector. There are planners in the voluntary sector. So it's not just local authority planners or within local authorities that planners actually work. There is quite a wide remit to the role of planning, and I think the research does focus on all of the planning profession. But the biggest response came from members in the RTPI members in the public sector. I think there's no doubt. The report said there's no doubt that the planning profession is a force for good, and it does make significant changes to the land use environment in Wales, and it is critical to delivering the far-reaching policies. The sort of results of the research, it's in the report, and of course the main report itself is appended to that. So I certainly advise members to actually read that. It is quite an interesting read. There were some sort of worrying trends came through on the research, and it's found high levels of planners being overstretched in their work, and this was having an impact on their well-being. 61% of all respondents reported being overstretched at least several times a week. 74% of local planning authority officers felt overstretched, and a staggering 21% of all respondents felt that they were overstretched all of the time. So that is quite a significant figure. Now the report identified that the need for planning to become more resilient as a profession was also relevant, and in particular the resilience of planning officers in relation to handling difficult situations, managing high expectations. The report identified these as weaknesses in the profession, but it also highlights that there's a lot of positive things as well. And the planning services, although we are, as a planning service, are under-resourced and overstretched, I don't mind saying that, because it's fact. The services continue to operate and be delivered, and my planners do take pride in their work and the role they play in society, and that's certainly the case for myself. And I do value the work that myself, my team, and you as a committee do in shaping the environment in this part of the world. I think from our perspective in Bridgend, or from my personal perspective, in terms of performance, I'm very just pleased that when I log on or come into work on a Monday morning, we still have a service and we still operate. Maybe creaking a bit, but we still operate, and that to me is the performance that I need. We can't do things as possibly as efficiently as we did previously, but we do it. And as a chief planner, I'm also mindful of the impact that's having on our officers as well. They're under great pressures, great workloads and great stresses, and that doesn't seem to have changed over the last couple of years. In fact, it's probably got a little worse following the pandemic. Our service area has been cut drastically over the last decade, and the role and the support we give to you as members has had to reduce as well during that time. There's some good news. We are hoping to build a little bit more resilience into the structure going forward, and hopefully take on a few new planners that can ease that burden, particularly in development control and enforcement areas. So this is really there just to sort of highlight this report. I think it's important for members to take note of that, and it's something that I hear when I talk to colleagues in other authorities nationally. All authorities are facing the same issues, and of course that does impact on the service that we provide to the other sector of the profession, in the private sector and the voluntary sector. The support and the speed of decision making is having an impact on critical developments coming forward. Now, this isn't nothing new. I've said this isn't new stuff. A couple of years ago, I did bring reports to Planning Committee on the Wales Audit Office, which identified that this is back in 2018. It did identify that the planning service in Wales isn't fit to deliver the far-reaching and policies and legislation that came down through Welsh Government, and that was identified a while ago. And similarly, the Senate's own Standards Committee also came to similar conclusions, and that was a bit of research that took place in 2019. I was involved with that, and they came to sort of similar conclusions. It's not a new problem, but this report, as I said, focuses on the well-being of the profession, and there are significant cracks being shown, and this is something that I'm very concerned about, and I think as a planning committee, I think you as members should also be concerned about as well. But there we are. That's the sort of nuts and bolts of it, members. So I'm happy to take any questions or queries on that.
Thank you, Jonathan. Has anybody got any questions on that? I can't see anybody putting their hands up. Can somebody formally move we noted, please? Thank you. Okay, go on to number 12. Training log, Jonathan. Do you want to go on to that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've got a training session straight after this committee. We took a punt on it being a fairly short agenda, that we do the training session afterwards rather than traditionally on the Wednesday before, because yesterday was council and there was a lot going on at that time. So we're doing a training session on the content of planning committee reports. So again, this is more of it's not a training session, it's more of a workshop, it's more of a discussion on the contents of the report and where why we have to do certain things and what improvements we can potentially take forward. We are still looking at delivering some training on enforcement, and as I mentioned previously, this will be, we're hoping to bring in Planning Aid Wales later this year to do that. That'll be a longer session. It won't be no normal slot. It'll be a morning or an afternoon session. We still have the Chief Planning Inspector who's willing to do a briefing for members, and we also have some training on conservation areas. And members will recall that we took a report to committee last time on having delegation on listed buildings, and that was approved by changes to our scheme of delegation was approved by council yesterday evening. Public rights of way again is on the agenda, and tree policy. We're not getting much response from the Wellbeing of Future Generations Commissioner, but as I said last time, it is a new incumbent into that role, and that may be something we have to look at towards the end of the year. But yeah, we've got quite a lot on the agenda. I'm hoping sort of that after this session today, we'll move forward onto more topic-based training sessions. So areas that are relevant to your work as in planning committee. Rather, the last couple of training sessions have been on procedural matters, which is quite important, and I think that there's a role for that. But I think we also need to sort of look at wider aspects of planning and issues that are relevant to your role. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anybody got any questions on that, or they want to add to it? No? Okay, thank you for that. There is one extra title that will be coming on, and that's Welsh Water. They're going to give us a presentation. Okay, so you can add that to your list as well. And number 13, I haven't got no urgent items to raise today, so I'll formally close the meeting at 11:05. Can we all convene back?